Snapshots. Over the past 100 years or so, thousands of people have taken thousands, or perhaps millions of snapshots of Lander, Wyoming and its environs. And for good reason. Situated on a Native American trail that is thousands of years old and surrounded by several key sites in the history of the American West, as well as remarkable scenery, the community of 7,000 and its outlying areas provide a feast for the eyes and the camera. This film, however, is more than a snapshot of Lander as it looks today. It's a snapshot of the people who make up this community, why they came here, what they like about their town, what they might change, and their thoughts and hopes for Lander's future. Maybe it's impossible to take an accurate picture of the heart and soul of a town, but we're about to try. After all, in Lander, we take on the big jobs, don't we?
Well, I guess the best description I heard was from someone who wanted to buy a piece of horse equipment and said they wanted to buy a hackamore, I think. And they said there was one place where you could maybe buy a hackamore, and there were 5 places where you could buy coffee latte. So the place has changed a little bit.
It's a beautiful mountain community of about 7,000 folks, with more folks living in the surrounding foothills of the mountains.
I was up on Table Mountain yesterday afternoon looking down on Lander from quite a bit higher, and it looked real small and well defined, clearly defined from up there. But when you get down here and drive around, I mean, you know, houses string out along all the roads going in and out of town, and but it's a real pretty little town. Lots of wide streets and friendly people. Beautiful mountain scenery all the way around.
Active downtown. Diverse population for a small Wyoming town, and no Walmart.
It's an agricultural community that's just gone bad in the sense that you know, the initial economy that this town is based on, mining and agriculture and all these things, is kind of being undermined by all these people who are doing other things.
It's got about everything to offer that a little town could offer, as far as recreation and as far as what I would say some clean living. We don't have too many problems like the big cities do, so in that respect, I'd say Lander's probably a real nice community to live in.
I like going up to Sinks Canyon and hiking up to the falls and going off the falls. That's fun. And you like slide down into the big pool. And then I like horseback riding.
One thing that always comes to mind to me when I talk about Lander, I describe it as an honest community. And by that, I mean there's a little of everything. It's not a one-horse town. It's not a town that just caters to tourists. It has a little bit of everything.
A little history.
Main Street's probably 10,000-year-old Indian trail. You know, our Main Street is thousands and thousands of years old. The reason that it's not oriented on a north-south, east-west axis, like towns in the Midwest or in eastern parts of Wyoming, is because they laid the buildings out on either side of the old Indian Trail, which became Main Street, and then the other streets paralleled that.
Post office was established 1875. Up to that point, the little town area had been called Pushrut because of the truck gardens that the people grew here to sell vegetables to the miners. It was renamed Lander because the post office didn't think Pushrut was a dignified enough name. And B.F. Lowe, who had taken up some of the original part of Lander, had known Colonel Lander. He was here at the time he was here. and he suggested his name. And then in 1884, the town site company was established, and that's when the town really started. Well, it was established as county seat. The county was established that year. That was probably one of your major landmarks. Years was 1884.
The Oregon Trail came near this area, and so we had lots of nationally recognized people visited Lander and the Lander area over a period of 100 years, and that kind of helped shape the community. And it was difficult for people to build the town because everything had to be hauled in wagons from the railroad down in Rawlins or Rock Springs or even Casper later on. And when Lander finally got a railroad, that's when the town really started to grow quickly.
And in the early days in the 30s, to attract tourists, people wanted to have a road up to the sinks that was fairly passable, so they used to have something called rock parties. Now the road wasn't paved, it was just a dirt road, but the rock parties were on Sunday, and after church people would come up in their wagons. The whole family would come. This was in the summertime. They'd have picnic lunches and they'd move rocks out of the way so that little by little the road was being made somewhat smoother, and this was supposed to attract tourists.
In more recent history, the U.S. Steel mine brought an influx of people, as well as development of the oil fields, uranium mines, those sorts of things. I think during the late 70s, early 80s, excuse me, when those industries fell apart, that had a significant impact on Lander. We seem to have lost a lot of the jobs that would attract and train young people at that time. It amounted to a mass out-migration of people who were younger with families who needed to go elsewhere to find jobs.
After the iron mine closed up on the hill, we tried to attract people who might want to come to town who would cost nothing. So we tried to attract people with no kids and retired probably in their 50s, and the idea was they could have a horse or two and go around on snow machines in the wintertime and horseback fishing in the summertime. We attracted a fair number of those families. The result was that we forgot to attract families that had kids. Now, the way our school system works, each kid is worth $8,000 a year on the hoof. So ideally you should attract families that have 2 kids.
My house is really old. I used to dig stuff in the backyard, digging holes, you know. You guys ever dig holes? Yeah, I used to dig holes all the time, go out and dig me a hole, you know. And I'd find stuff, because like my backyard's the old landfill. But it was kind of a clean landfill, you know, not like one of those new age dirty landfills. You know, landfills aren't built like they used to be. They used to be pretty clean, you know. And so I'd find all kinds of cool stuff, like dolls and plates and stuff, you know. And they're really old and historical.
Why did we come here?
I moved here because my husband got a job at Knowles, the National Outdoor Leadership School.
I accidentally came here and moved here, and I couldn't have planned it any better.
I don't know that I chose. It was a fluke. A guy I went to college with at Colorado State was working for the Red Canyon Ranch when Henry Slingerland owned it, and he called me one time. I was down in Colorado and asked me if I wanted to come work for him. And I said, you bet. So I rolled in here in September of '75 and went to work for the Red Canyon Ranch, and been here ever since, 25 plus years.
I was living in Chicago at the time, actually in the very busy south side of Chicago, and I was tired of city life. And you don't know this, but in 1977 it was kind of the John Denver era and Rocky Mountain High, and I wanted to live in Denver. However, Denver also had lots of people there. This area wrote me a letter. The Lander Hospital actually sent me a letter and said, as long as you're looking out west, come look by us. So that's how I ended up in Lander.
After my discharge from the service, January 1st, 1946, I came up to Jackson elk hunting and then came over to Lander to bring my elk over here in the cold storage plant, and I visited with this laundry, which was for sale. So then I made them offer, and when I went back to Denver, in about a month I got an offer from the real estate guy, and I came up and bought the business, and I've been here ever since 1946.
The reason we decided to come back is because our oldest girl, Peggy, was in about 4 different kindergartens while we were doing this type of work. So we decided it would be better for her if she landed in one place and went to one school. So that's mainly why we came back to Lander. And of course it's my hometown and Donna's hometown, so naturally we love it here, you know.
Well, I have lived around the world, and I literally have lived in Asia and Europe, all over the United States, and I keep coming back, so there must be something, just being here.
The mountains, mainly. I love the mountains. I grew up in Michigan. They're pretty flat there. The weather is pretty bad there. Well, I love the weather here because it's good summertime, great winters. I'm always fascinated by a May snowstorm when it comes in out of nowheres, or a September snowstorm. We haven't had one of those in a long time, but there's been times I remember a snowstorm be here in September.
I have found meaningful employment here.
I live here because I love the outdoors. I like living in a small town, and being in Wyoming is great.
Well, my husband and I moved here 35 years ago, primarily because that's where his job was. He worked for the Game and Fish, and I also knew people here, and I knew that I could get a teaching job here. So we picked Lander because it was in the center of the state and because it was close to the mountains and close to hunting and fishing and the things that we like to do.
We lived in Casper at the time for a couple of years, and my dad was kind of one of those people who liked to move all over creation. And anyway, they decided to move up here. We bought a place out there by Ray Lake and moved there, and I was just one happy little camper because I liked the country life as opposed to the city life. So being a young kid, why, it offered all kinds of opportunities for me to explore and get out in the hills and just have a good old time.
What do we like best?
Well, I think I'm a lot like everybody in the community. They seek the mountains and the outdoors. Obviously, with Knowles located here, people come to Lander for the outdoors, and I'm a lot like those people. I like to hunt and fish and ski and snowmobile, and so every opportunity that I get, I try to get outside.
Probably for me, since I love the outdoors, it's got diversity for me to hike, bike, ski. The other thing that's really great is, which just seems incredible to me, is you can go up to Sinks Canyon and you don't have to pay fees to go anywhere.
Well, I think the best things about Lander is the smaller type community. We're a smaller community without the big city atmosphere. However, we have a lot of the big, not the big city type, but a lot of the accommodations that you would find in big cities. You know, nice hospitals, nice grocery stores, good shopping outlets, and we're centrally located in the state so that we don't have to go very far to get to what we really do need. So,
I think going on hikes and enjoying the outdoors, that's probably the coolest thing about living in Lander, and no matter what season it is, you can always find something to do outside.
It's people, and it's great weather. It's sunny here all the time compared to a lot of places.
I really like the small town. I like that over the years I've really been able to develop some great relationships with people and work with those folks in the community to make things happen.
Yeah, we have diverse cultures: Indian, white, Hispanic. You know, there's the ranching community, and then the tree hugger community, and there's just a wide variety of people here that generally get along pretty well, and we're all proud of our kids, you know, that kind of stuff.
I like the small town. I like the fact that I see people that I know whenever I'm going around to different stores or doing whatever, and like it's just pretty cozy.
There's something kind of magical about Lander that most people have a very difficult time putting their finger on. I think it has a lot to do with the people that live here. I think that there's a real broad cross-section of the United States that lives in Lander. I think there are wealthy people, I think there are poorer people, but I think the thing that makes Lander so special is that the people who live here care about others in a very big way. They care about the land, and they live their lives as if there's not much time left, and that makes it all the more meaningful each and every day. When folks walk down the streets in Lander, they look each other in the eyes. That's a good thing.
Well, you can be as loud as you want without too many people getting mad. You got to worry about crime too much. Leave your truck unlocked all the time. Probably being quiet and far out from others. Just quietness, peacefulness.
There's a lot of stuff to do, and it's not too big, so you can't get lost.
Well, you couldn't beat it with a stick when you, as far as raising children.
What would we change if we could?
I can't think of anything really drastic. I think the local government's fine. I have no complaints about Lander at all.
Make it smaller. I'd like small towns.
It's a great place to live. I don't think I'd change anything.
I wouldn't change anything.
I mean, I think that's one place we're really short. We don't have anything for, you know, there's no future. The kids have to go out of state.
To find
See,
work.
Tim does not, our grandson just graduated last summer, and he doesn't want to leave Wyoming, but I think he's going to have to.
I'd like to see more opportunities and for young people to stay in Lander, job opportunities.
I would change Lander in that I would like to have more jobs for younger folks, more jobs that aren't directly government associated. Have it be a little more progressive economically.
Better paying jobs, you might say. It seems like most of the jobs we have are either government jobs, which aren't bad paying jobs in this, or you have service jobs, you know, like working at McDonald's or places like that, but we don't have any major industry in Lander that puts a pretty good payroll into the community, such as U.S. Steel did back in the 60s.
Many different kinds of jobs in Lander, but sometimes there's not a lot available for new people moving here because it's a small town.
Make it more of an more open to new businesses coming in. We talk about being progressive and wanting to see Lander grow. Well, in order for it to grow, we need to get more businesses.
I would really work on recruiting some businesses to the area that would provide some opportunities. And whether that's high-tech type businesses, capitalizing more on tourism, or adding value to agriculture or other things that we already produce. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be a recruitment from outside. It can also be development of business that's already within the community.
I would allow more growth. Lander needs to get more jobs and attract more people roughly my age or younger to come to Lander and live, because it's a really great community, and if we could just get some jobs here, that's probably what I would change.
If I could change something about Lander, I think it'd be to try to keep Lander from growing the way it is, and to try to keep Lander to be the most, a more unique, small, ruralized town instead of, becoming a big urban type development. I try to change that to keep it the way it kind of is, rather than growing and expanding.
I think Lander is Jacksonifying to a point. You leave Wyoming, right? And you ask anyone about Wyoming, and they say, "Oh yeah, I've been to Jackson Hole." You know what I want to do? I want to slap them, hit them, do something really, really mean to them, poke their eyes out with hot, whatever.
Lander has grown so much in the last few years that it's just kind of outgrown me. I see all of these additions, that I can remember as hayfields, you know. And they're just, now that every time you turn around there's another subdivision. And so I don't know if that's good or bad, but to me it's growing too fast.
I'm not saying the old residents here don't want change. They want Lander to be like it was 100 years ago. They don't want shopping centers. They don't want progress. They don't want a bunch of people. And to tell you the truth, I don't either. But here I am, an outsider that's moved to Lander almost, well, 20 years ago now, and I don't want other people moving here.
I think we need like a rec center or more to do.
Just make more places where kids to hang out and stuff like that.
The disconnect on the transportation is one of the things I dislike. For instance, if you wanted to fly out of here to go somewhere, it about breaks your bank account just to get to Denver. And that's a day's shot. You can go all around the world almost for the time you get to Denver and get wherever you're going. Get checked in and fly to Denver, and in a little small airplane they give you knee pads so you can crawl back in that hole, and stuff like that.
Put up more signs. I think that people that live here know where to go and know what to do, and I think I'd have more information on what there is to do, so that for the new ones we would know what's happening and where to go and all that good stuff.
I would change some of the streets in Lander. I know that. A lot of the streets have been dug up so many times, you know, that they really need to have overlays put on them now. And I think that Mick Wolf, since he's our new mayor, that he should look into that situation along with the water situation, and maybe do one street at a time each year or whatever.
And I'm not sure if I could possibly change it. It'd be nice to have a little bit more diversity in the types of people. And I think of Lander as kind of being in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you have to drive really far to get here from any of the larger cities. It'd be nice to have a little bit diverser population.
We could use a couple, like, you know, minorities or maybe some other religious groups here, or even some atheists. I don't know, I just think it needs some diversity. I mean, it has like any small town, you know, you're going to have the exact same people, and that's all you have. And I don't know, if we had some more diversity here, I think it'd be a lot better off.
I would work on people, a greater number of people being a little more open-minded.
I think, like all communities, that there are underlying currents in the community that are very troublesome. I think there's racism, if you want to call it racism, especially in relation to the reservation. I think the relationship between the reservation community and Lander is often troublesome. Often it's off the radar. It's not something that's seen daily or talked about daily or really known about through all segments of the community. But there are problems, there are major problems that I see.
Lander is not a progressive town, and historically it's never been progressive. Riverton is a lot more progressive than Lander is. And at the time that we lived out at Morton for 3 or 4 years at one time, and we could go into Riverton and, you know, everyone was friendly and the stores were accommodating. And I had grown up in Lander, and there was a different feeling when you came up to Lander. And Lander isn't as progressive. And a lot of times they complain that something isn't up here, and it's nobody's fault but their own.
Why does Riverton get everything? Walmarts, Kmart's, all that stuff. They'll complain about that too. I'm sure Woodward's right now is complaining about that. But we need something like that in Lander. We just can't stay stagnant all our life.
I would like to see
Well, I would like to see them use the 1 cent sales tax because you can bring in stuff for youth. I would like to see some more growth in businesses, various type. I know they try, but it doesn't always seem to be working. I'd like to see more businesses, keep our kids here. I'd like to see the 1 cent sales tax brought in because I think that would bring more businesses into this. If you look at Casper, they have that. They have businesses come in. They help for growth. Not a lot of growth, but just a little growth, just enough to keep us going.
What does the future hold?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot like it is now. 20 years ago, I was coming to Lander competing in football and wrestling, and you know what? It looks about the same.
Unless, Southwest, unless like Quest or some kind of corporations came in, I just don't see it growing in leaps and bounds over the next 10 to 20 years.
Truthfully, what I see in Lander 20 to 30 years from now is probably the same little old sleepy town that we've always had. The only thing that might really change it would be if they develop some sort of mineral industry close by. Beyond that what I see for Lander is just the same little old sleepy town.
20 years, I don't see much of a change. I hope environmentally we stay the same. I know we need to economically make some changes. I have some fears with the government and public lands and our rights being violated to go to a lot more wilderness, and so we can't get onto the public lands like we used to. I see that being a problem down the road. But economically, I'd like to see some changes, but I'm not sure. I hope they're gradual changes and not bringing big industry in for pollution, etc.
I don't see Lander growing huge. I think that this community has always kind of guarded the way it is. It's not had a huge desire to expand. I see Lander maybe growing by a few thousand, but not expanding greatly.
I see Lander growing slowly because I don't know that it will have a huge industrial boom or anything to that sort, but I do believe people want to move to Lander to retire and maybe to raise their kids a lot like I did. So I think it'll grow slowly, and I do see it taking on some of the attributes of Jackson and Du Bois in the fact that I believe property will go up in value.
Hopefully it'll be a little more progressive, just so it doesn't dry up and blow away and turn into a ghost town or just some big major retirement community where everybody's, driving slowly and annoyingly. So hopefully it'll be good.
I say it stays the same because nothing much happens around here. That's it. Probably get a new Burger King, that's it.
I'll pretty much keep it the same as it is, as far as I would like to see the buildings, and they've been working on it more the last few years, preserving the old buildings and using them. And if they build new buildings, kind of build them friendly with the old ones, kind of keep it on that order. Because it's brought in a lot of new businesses since they restored the old building.
I don't know, more populated, that's what everybody wants, but I sure hope it ain't gonna be real populated enough to drive the animals out or anything.
I think but hope that it isn't just a third home bedroom community for Los Angeles or Denver, but I think it may well be.
It's the big cities are getting so trashed and people are just wanting to get outside of the big areas. And I think Lander or Wyoming especially will feel a income of people in the next few years. I think we're going to see a great, even though there's no industry, people can work out of their homes on their computers now, and you don't have to be at their site. So I think we're going to see an increase in people. Not that I want it, I like it like it is. Just don't tell anybody we're here.
I've just gotten the feeling of the last year or so that Lander is going to grow. For 30 years, Lander may have grown a little bit, but I really don't think it has. But I really do think that Lander's going to grow in a way that all of us will notice it. It won't be real huge, but we'll notice the influx of people.
I can't imagine it's going to do anything but grow. A lot of people are coming here from out of state because they like our climate and they like the environment and they like the fact that there are a lot of things for, well, for example, retired people. There are lots of things for them to do.
Some last words.
In Lander, you have a lot of contrasting views.
And we also have a lot of groups in town who would be a little more liberal in thinking than the National Outdoor Leadership School, Wyoming Outdoor Council, Nature Conservancy. Those are the groups I can think of right now that I think lend some more diverse thoughts.
It's always been kind of an independent place. The people that came here were, well, a lot of them actually came from back east, came from some of the same areas, New York and Pennsylvania. But they were all, a lot of them were originally gold miners and stuff, but they came down here and settled, and some of the very first ranches in this part of Wyoming were right here. And but they were an independent bunch of characters.
The mountains in the background. You got an atmosphere of clean air, clean water. You can go up here fishing in the river or in the streams up here, and you can see the bottom of the river. Des Moines, Iowa, and the Des Moines River where I came from is nothing but mud. You can't see nothing except garbage, and that's what's cool about living here.
We border on the reservation, on the Shoshone-Arapaho Reservation, and one can travel out there and see some of the culture and some of the historical landmarks out there.
A safe and friendly community. We've watched over the last 10 years what the community could do after U.S. Steel pulled out. They kind of pulled themselves together. And
I also think it's unique due to its climate. It has a very mild climate. I enjoy being in a place where the wind doesn't blow.
The kids here in Lander really, we're not on America's Most Wanted every week, and we're not missing persons every week and missing kids every week. And when our kids come up missing here, they're at a friend's house, or at least they're being looked after by a friend. That's what's unique and neat about living here.
Lander has a really good group of people that become very close friends because a lot of their families are farther away, and so once you make friends, they all pitch in, and Lander is a wonderful community to helping others all the time, no matter what the problems are.
Lander is unique in that there are a lot of people here who really fulfill their interests and do a lot of things that they love, and that helps make it a better town. You can make a difference in Lander.
So, maybe this film is more than a picture. Maybe it's a tool for discussion and planning. We are here for different reasons, but we share and will continue to share many things, including the future of our community. This is a place where magic can happen, if we make it happen. We are uniquely qualified to meet the diverse challenges that face us in this sheltered spot in the shadow of the Wind Rivers. It's up to us.